having a business plan is very important. Sometimes you've got to step back from the vision of the business owner and actually look at the nuts and bolts of building this business. We're in the building trade. How are we building it brick by brick? What do we need? And building a business doesn't come overnight. It does come with pain, tears, sleepless nights. But the excitement is that goal, that vision that you've envisaged coming to fruition.
Welcome everyone to today's episode, Build Smart Blueprint. We will be talking about running a business with your spouse or your partner. And my name is Kasia, and I'm today's guest host of this episode. And I have a pleasure talking today with Maureen Anderson. She is a psychotherapist who works with individuals and couples. And I believe the speciality of yours is the relationships, as well as anxiety and overcoming trauma, which in a perhaps strange way, I believe that it really ties all of it with our subject today. So welcome, Maureen.
Hi, thank you for having me again. And just as a correction, I'm not actually a psychotherapist. I don't have letters after my name, but I have worked for over 20 years with families. And as you said, a specialist area is around grief and loss. So the experiences that I have gained over 20 years of working with families around the country. And the nice thing about, working with these families is that you learn, not only do you learn about them, you learn about yourself, and you learn about the structures that often contain us. And we also learn about the pitfalls that we fall into when we're in these dynamics. As you mentioned in the introduction about relationships, whether it's with a spouse or an intimate partner, it's about how do we navigate the complexities of those relationships.
And that is a very interesting combination, actually, the relationship. When you have this intimate relationship with your, a spouse or partner, and then you also have the business together, because it's such a different dynamics that you're suddenly entering into, where how do you find the balance, and what are the boundaries that you need to set up? And that's something I would want to talk to you about. So do you believe there are some unique challenges that such couples need to face, or they definitely will face during that process when running business together?
Absolutely. So for sure, running a business, once navigating those significant relationships and with children involved in that whole mix, requires you as the, business owners, the couple, to balance very delicately the interconnections of those expectations. So the commitment, communication, and strategic planning is key when you have this combined roles. But by addressing those challenges directly, we can't pretend that they're not there. So addressing them directly, setting the boundaries is really important, and prioritising both the family and the business. Arguably, you could thrive and be successful in all areas, but you have to think about those three dynamics, really, which is the commitment, the communication, and the strategic planning for everything that you're doing.
And so what would you say are those, let's say, the three key top points that every couple should perhaps even look at and discuss and agree on before entering business together, if they're in the circumstances of entering the business while they were in relationship? Because I believe there might be some where they're already in a business and then it turns into, intimate relationship. And perhaps that's a little bit different. But what's your experience, and what are those top three key points that, our listeners can take out and be like, oh, okay, do you know what? I've never done it, or we're planning to do it and we need to talk about it.
Yeah. I like the top three, but I think there's four. I think there's four key areas. So the four would be work-life balance.
Okay.
Without you balancing the business and the home life, then everything collapses, because unhappiness and discontentment means that we're not going to be functioning, we're not going to be thriving. Confusion about the roles that we play, the role that we're playing in the business, the roles that we take on in the home. If that's not clear, and although there are some, sometimes fluid, we still have to have what are our key strengths in these areas.
Yeah.
Finances.
Yeah.
If we haven't got a plan, if we're scared to talk about the money,
which a lot of us do, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
If we want the platinum and we're only working for the bronze, then there's going to be a disconnect. So we have to have an agreement.
Do you mean like having the combined on one vision, which is the money wise as well? Would you call it like that?
Yes.
It's like a vision where we need to set an intention and we know both what we're working towards to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it goes back to the communication. If we're not communicating these in our challenges, then how are we each to know where the other person wants to head to? Because this is a journey of change and a journey of intention that you're making. It's a commitment. Relationships are like a business in and of itself. We have an intention. We go into these relationships, these intimate relationships, to succeed. We make families because we want it to be successful. Do we put in the same amount of effort into our intimate, personal home relationship as we do with the business? Do we have a business plan for our home? Do we have a plan, a vision, as you said? Because we have that for the business, but the business cannot be more important than family. And if you are in a family business, then the family can't be more important than the business, because the business is giving the family the things that the lifestyle that the family want. And the fourth one would be time management, being able to juggle work, home, relationship.
Yeah.
And setting aside, if you have children, for the couple to have their time as well, which is very important. So time management. So there are the four areas I think that people would have challenges with.
Which is really interesting, because I definitely can relate to all of them. Because I was in a business with my husband for a few years, and at some point we had to face them all. Like, you can't escape it. So if you try, I felt like if we're gonna keep escaping, it's either the business gonna collapse in the best case scenario, or even us as a couple, right? Because you suddenly it brings up so many things in you. And as I said, the dynamics change so much that you suddenly, it can be really challenging.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you find that perhaps people, do people find it quite hard to separate them two? Because, and I can speak from my experience only, I definitely struggled so much more than my husband to switch from one role to another, in terms of, I'm not even talking about the role within a business, which I believe is very important to make it clear who's responsible for what. And we can also talk about this in a minute, but also the, just switch as like, okay, it's a 4 o'clock and we're still in a business. So we're business partners. And then an hour later, we husband and wife. So whatever happened in the business, and we may have some disagreements or whatever there was, it has to be, switched off. And I struggled with this a lot, where for him was like, within a minute, he was able just to, communicate with me. And I was like, no, I need time. And it was hard. And So I think there's quite a few questions actually in one, but one, do you find the difference between male and female? If either of them perhaps find it easier or harder to switch between business and life very quickly? And also how important is to set, especially, I think, the roles within the business, because I would assume that within the personal life, they already have some sort of roles agreed, hopefully. But because we're talking about, I know, I feel like a lot of us actually don't.
Sure.
And we just assume, and we come with those assumptions from our own worlds. And that's why there's lots of clashes, which we need to discuss. But I also feel like if you don't have your personal life at least sorted a little bit or to like a good level, the business is not going to run anyway.
Yeah.
It's not possible. So I feel like, so yeah, one question, do you find male or females find it harder? And two, how important is to separate those business roles and why? And do they have an effect on the personal life afterwards?
Firstly, people do make a choice as to how they communicate their needs and wants and these expectations. There was a book, I think it's back in the 90s, Men Are from Mars and Women from Venus, something. And I think he talked about how we communicated differently.
Mm-hmm.
They often said that women are very good at multitasking. But this is all a big myth. Because why do we need to be juggling so many things and trying to get everything right? And then we ourselves then collapse, we become shattered. So I think we have to distinguish what are the important key areas within this dynamic. When it comes to communication, I can't overemphasize how important that is. With communication, so many positive things can grow out of effective, honest communication. Without it are the assumptions, misunderstandings, and stress. So we as people will make a choice. But if we don't understand that there are severe consequences for not doing that, for not being transparent, not just business will fail, the relationship will collapse. And then what was all of that hard work in the early years for if we're not communicating effectively? So I think whatever stage of the business and the relationship that you are in as couples, it's never too late to redefine how we're going to move forward. Like in any organisation, and I'm saying relationships are on a par with a business, we have a strategy, we have a meeting, and within that relationship, as we're business partners and we're intimate partners, we should have the same level of respect in the workplace and at home. And if we can have that mindset, we wouldn't then, I guess, be vexed with our partners after the working day, because actually this is a business decision that's taken place here. We may not like it, but if one of the couple, I don't know, if one of the couple is managing the finances and the other is managing give me an example of the different roles that one would play in the industry.
So one might be managing the sites. Let's say project managing.
Right. Yeah. So if I'm doing the finances and you're doing the project managing, I should not interfere with your professional decision as to how you're managing that site.
Okay.
We should be able to have a meeting about what the plan is for managing the site. And I would say, well, look, we can't afford to have another person on this site because it's going to put us into a deficit. You will have to take that into consideration. Your professional decision should be respected because we need another man on site so that we can finish this job, bring it in on time, get the money, we'll be fine. There has to be that level of respect. And so therefore it should not then spill over onto the dining table in the evening after 5 o'clock. We can't have, if you do that, there's going to be conflict. It means that you won't have a nice meal. The family will be affected. The children will be affected because our parents are still talking about work.
Yes. Yes.
So I really think there has to be boundaries are really important, and respecting each other and each other's roles are very important. But I think there are these obstacles that are naturally in place for the business and for the home.
Yeah.
We've talked about communication and the impact of poor communication. We've talked about boundaries, why boundaries are important in every part of our lives, but particularly when you've got this dynamic. But there's also the decision-making that we touched on. We've got to respect each other's strengths. We've accepted these roles for our business, but we've also accepted these roles within our home life.
Yes.
And we're having these regular meetings.
Yes, and I guess a part of it is we trust our partner, in our relationship as well as the business, whatever the area they're looking after. And, we trust that they're going to make the best decisions. But I also believe that it's so important to remember that we're all just humans and we make errors.
Yes.
So because, the other person's, let's say, looking after finances and something does go wrong, it's also not one of those things where we can stop blaming each other, which is also quite easy thing to do, right? And so I'm just wondering if, especially when a conflict comes, so is the communication. I think it's always about the effective communication, how we communicate and understanding also how other person receives it and what's the best way to communicate with them. But are there any? I can definitely think what we've been doing, but it may not necessarily be what's generally is the best way to do it, or it works for majority of people. But I'd be interested to hear what are the maybe few key things of how people can what they can, or differently, when listening to us and after they finish, what they can take away, like few things that they can put into their life and know that it's going to improve the business and the communication. So I don't know, I'm going to throw one of the examples. So for instance, you set up a weekly meeting at this time and then we discuss all the, not necessarily the dreamy stuff, but all the issues and maybe, even how we feel, just to be able to throw it out there rather than just marinating inside of us and then one day it's just everything explodes. So what are your tips basically to whoever is listening?
Yeah. My absolute number one favorite tip that I've used in my own home, I've used with work with different clients, is the weekly meeting.
Okay.
The weekly meeting, it doesn't have to be about stressful things. When I worked in social care, they had this strategy called the signs of safety. And it had 3 columns. And the first column would have what's working well. And we would all pour in what's working well, because we don't want to talk about the doom and gloom. We want to talk about what's been the great things about this week, what's gone really well this week. And we list all of these great things that we've done. As much as in the back of our head, we want to talk about what hasn't gone well. It's really important to list all those great things that have occurred personally and in the business, and maybe you saw a butterfly. List all of those things that's given you joy. The second column, I'm hoping you can visualize this, is what is not working well.
I'm actually also doing my columns.
Oh, excellent. So the second column is what is not working well.
Yep.
And you list those things. What isn't working well? It could be time management, or it could be that you bring your work home to the dining room table. It could be that, you're not getting home at the time that you said things like this. It could be anything at all. And then the third column is, what are we going to do about it? And by when? So alongside each of those points in the second column, your third column will relate to what are we going to do about it? because it's not just one
It's like an
person's
action plan.
responsibility. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
based on your efforts to resolve what isn't working well, you then get success. And as
Yes.
time goes by, those weekly meetings move to fortnightly meetings, to monthly meetings. I think you should at least have a meeting once a month, because then you can put in all of the things like, we haven't had a holiday for a while. Can we factor this into our business? Can I take time away from the business? You start to be just
because also our ideas or desires or the plans for life and business change as well as individual people. So especially if you're in a relationship and running business together, I feel like it's so important to have those meetings and discuss it, and so we understand that we're on the same page.
Yes.
Like, because sometimes I definitely have it with JP where we had it more often than now, but before it was like, oh, I didn't know you don't think like this anymore, or you don't need this or want this anymore. And I was like, yeah, it was because we didn't have those meetings in place. And as soon as we did do it more regularly, then it felt like everything flows much better.
And it's beautiful, you see,
Yeah.
because you can then review your meeting. You said, well, this was the action point then. You've tried it out and you've realised actually that's not really working for us anymore.
Yeah.
So we need to review that. So nothing is set in
Absolutely.
stone.
Yes.
But at the same time, if things are so movable, what does that say about your intention? We're moving, so often that you can't actually have a concrete plan and that you can't actually achieve your goals. What would
that's
that say?
interesting, because I feel like perhaps the goal, so maybe I didn't make myself clear enough, but I feel like we often may have a goal, like end goal, but the journey changes. It changes constantly. So we may have a plan of how to get there, but it's just changing. And that's okay. I feel that that's okay. Because we may be growing and changing as well as we go. So obviously that needs to be adjusted too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So and I also feel like it's, if you don't adjust and change, you don't grow, right? Like, so in a way, it is so important. You've got one vision, and also find like the more you grow, the vision grows as well. It may change as well, but it grows, which is so beautiful. Yeah.
I think also the vision may grow, but it can also become more simple. It can be simplified, and I think as we age, as you mentioned, our goals change. I know as a grandmother, somebody that's approaching 60, I just choose peace and nature and joy. Whereas when I was in my 30s, trying to, get another promotion, acquiring stuff. And it's kind of like, this is not important. And, for my grandchildren who are, they're under 8 years of age, I say to them, choose nature, let's go for a walk, enjoy the beach, look up at the stars. Try and simplify things as much as possible so that they don't feel so much pressure, society's pressure, to have so much, because it often doesn't make people happy. And I think as a, in the business, it's about how do you manage growth, acquisition, with the pressure that comes with having more. How do you manage that? What do you do for your well-being? Because, as a business owner and, as a couple, and you may have had staff in the past, how do you manage their well-being when you have all of this pressure because you are becoming so successful? How have you managed that, and how have you navigated that?
I think this is such a complex subject in a way, because we are all so different. And I think that some people just naturally, almost like they build to to grow businesses, and they actually find lots of joy and like peace in this. And that, if that's you, that's amazing. And I think there is other two groups. So another one would be, which definitely I was in that group, where I was pushing. Oh my God, we were pushing so hard for many years. We didn't have even one holiday. We didn't sleep the nights, like growing. And we did really well, but it wasn't actually me. And I'm now only realizing after having a child and really enjoying my peace and quiet, where JP is amazing at running businesses, so it wasn't really me. And then you've got this other group where kind of, if they just prefer simply life. So there is no right or wrong, as long as we find our happiness within it and joy. But definitely there's so much pressure generally from the society of getting more and more and more. And there's this kind of status thing. But yeah, this is such a complex subject.
Because I was also thinking, when you're, in business and in the relationship, that there's competition, lots of competition that will bring on like the stressors.
Interesting.
There's the economy that can change, and the business could go like this, or it could go like that. And then there's society, as you said, society changes. 1 minute they're in love with you and what you're doing, and then the next, it could all go belly up. And so the pressure then on the family, what a strain for those. So it's really important that we go back to communication, that we're communicating with our partners what's going on, so that they are, they're very much a part of the changing dynamics, so that they can catch you if you're slipping and vice versa.
And I guess it's to sort of be, again, on the same page. So if we do have a children in the mix, we can be there for them and be the calm rather than the chaos, right? Like, and kind of being the example of things can go great and things can go wrong, but as long as we're in peace with ourselves and we can work it out, because there always something goes wrong, then we're fine. And I think that's the part, especially, I think when you have children, it's so important, right?
Yeah.
But when they come, because there's definitely, we can't avoid it. The conflict's going to come up. Are there any ways that, other than communication, because I think we definitely established that communication is the key, and having those weekly meetings are incredibly important. If we find the time, I almost feel like if you don't find the time, then what are you doing? Like there's almost no point of carrying on. Like, find that time. Is there anything else that you would say, just, apply and test it for yourself?
I think, yes, we've said communication, we've said the meetings. I would say, we've said boundaries, so the delegation of responsibilities.
Maybe a little bit more about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the delegation of responsibilities, I think, is key. But it's not you say, well, you'll do this. It's about, what are my strengths? Yeah. What am I really good at? What am I passionate about? What do I like doing as well? Because that's important. I know that not all jobs you can cherry pick, but as much as possible, you do the things that you're really passionate about, because you will get so much out of it, and the company will really benefit from your expertise in a particular area. And that's really important.
I will just jump a little bit on it, because probably a lot of people who are listening this might be at the very early stages of the business, where yes, you do have to pretty much do everything. And if I may, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing from you is, even if you have to do all of this, just like almost focus even more and try to enjoy even more those bits which you really like and love and look forward to it. And almost, would you say, so for me, it was definitely like making a list, like daily tasks. And sometimes I would put my favorite tasks at the end. So almost like I wanted to do everything first, which I didn't necessarily enjoy. And then I'm like, okay, now I can do this. Are there any things like that maybe we can
I think that's a really good
do?
way of looking at it, actually. As you said, for those that are early starting, they're on their own, or it's just, a two-person job at the moment, is ensure that you are accomplished. I think whether it's doing some online courses, if it's like admin, many of us don't really like to do the paperwork. We don't like to chase for invoices. How tiresome is it to try and get the best deals? But you have to do the work. You have chosen to go into business. You've chosen to be self-employed, arguably. And so now it is about building that plan. Having a business plan is very important. And sometimes you've got to step back from the vision of the business owner and actually look at the nuts and bolts of building this business. We're in the building trade. How are we building it brick by brick? What do we need? I remember there was an example of, how do you make a cup of tea? Now, some people might just say, well, you put water into a cup or into a teapot. So, but how do you make a cup of tea? So what are all of the steps that you require to make a nice cup of tea? It starts with boiling the kettle, doesn't it? It starts with getting the tea bags that you're choosing or the tea leaves. You've got to, some people warm their cup or they warm their teapot. Then you're pouring the hot water, literally step by step by step. You can't run before you can walk, is an old saying. And building a business doesn't come overnight. It does come with, pain, tears, sleepless nights. But the excitement is that goal, that vision that you've envisaged coming to fruition. And for some people, as you mentioned, JP is a great businessman. He's an entrepreneur. He's got all of these ideas. His joy may well be not in the end result, but in the steps that it takes to get to that place where I've done it. Because then he moves on to the next thing. And that's what entrepreneurs do. And most business owners are entrepreneurs. They're creative people. They've got an idea and they want to see it come to fruition. And then they hand it over and then they're on to the next thing. So I do think it is about, understanding what it takes and being prepared to do everything before you can hand it over to the growing business and the other people that will be working for you.
Exactly. I think it's super important to have that great understanding of every little step so you can delegate it very well. And also on so many levels, like, just understand how everything runs before you hand it over.
Because also when you understand how everything runs, when you have a workforce, it means that your checks and balances will be accurate because there takes a level of trust when you're handing projects over to somebody else to either manage, getting in trays to do these jobs. People, you've got to trust them not to overcharge, to remove
to cut corners.
Right? There's a lot of trust there, so you have to be aware of what's going on.
Although I do believe that although you have to have that understanding, but not necessarily of every single detail, because I feel like the reason of often employing, especially specialists, right, in a certain area, is what you're paying them for is because they are much better than you. And so they bring into the table something that you perhaps you could do in 10 years if you start focusing just on this little aspects of it. But of course, the trust and but that's again another big subject. But let's talk about something slightly different, which is couples running a business together, and there's obviously lots of ups and downs, and then in the personal life as well, and then the kids and all of these things happening. How to maintain the romance or the romantic part of a relationship, which is super important for at least majority of people, right? And we're going to talk about majority because we don't have time to talk about this little other parts of it. But how to do it, to not lose it, to maintain it. And because essentially business comes and goes, you may, sell it or run and start another one. And I feel like actually the main focus is, or the priority, at least for me, is it has been always our relationship. Because without it, there is nothing. And if we're good, we can make it work anything, anywhere,
Absolutely.
at any time.
Absolutely.
But the romance,
yes,
that's such a key. And a lot of people talk about it. Everyone's just so exciting. We're going to do business together. And, a few years down the line, you realize, oh, man, we haven't been on a date. Or, we haven't had intimate moments for months.
Yeah.
How to go about that?
Yeah. And you're right. It's often one of those taboo subjects that people will look on the outside and go, oh, look at them. They look great. They don't really know what happens behind closed doors.
Yes.
And again, it goes back to the communication. Our needs and wants are really important. So how do we talk to our partners about the love? We can have so many of these meetings. What's working well for us intimately? What isn't working well? Why isn't it working well? And so we can actually say, look, we haven't, as you said, we haven't been on a date. So what are we going to do about it? We're going to factor in date night for every couple. Date night really should be a priority. But how do we have date night if we have children?
Yeah.
So it's about that network. Who is in our support network? And I remember talking to JP previously about our circle of interdependence. Who is in our circle? Who do we trust? Because that's absolutely paramount when it comes to our children.
Yeah.
Who do we trust? Who could have our child for a couple of hours whilst we have a date? It doesn't have to be an evening date. It can be a daytime date. We're self-employed. We sort out our own hours. We could have a breakfast date, if our children
That's an absolutely great idea, yes. Especially that a lot of kids might be at school as well at that time, or nurseries. If parents choose, send them to institution, then yes, that's a good point.
Absolutely. And, you can, potentially be utilising grandparents, godparents, your guardians. Who are the people who know you as a family, who knows your children? And who do you trust? Give them an activity to do for the day with your child so they're not just in the house. So that, my child might want to go to the museum. Would you take them to the museum? That's a good 3 hours for a date. Whether you book yourselves into a hotel, 3 hours is more than enough for intimacy and a meal and a shower.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it that way. If you don't have it at the moment, or is it super rare, then the 3 hours once a week or every fortnight, it's a godsend. So, and as you said, it is such a taboo, and we have gone through this with JP, where it was, we had a hard time, and it was hard to find also help from anywhere because it seemed like everyone is doing so great. Like, is that supposed to happen? Are we weird? Is something wrong with us? Or at least I was thinking, like, is something wrong with me? But not realizing that, there can be things put in place. That's what you said. Like, there's even that simple example. Is there anything else that we can do?
I think I would also be thinking about what are the, those moments of joy. How do we let the person know that we're still in love with them? Because it's not just about them being able to provide. We're not just here to provide. We're here to thrive and to be excited. So what are those tokens of love and affection and appreciation that we can give to our partners? As people who are running businesses together. Now, let me go back. If you were working for someone else, just on a payroll, your boss, because of your great work, would be saying, congratulations, you've done a sterling job. Here is a token of our appreciation for what you're doing for the company. Now, as
Yeah.
business owners, what do you do to recognize each other's contribution to the growing business? Because
Yeah.
that's really important. It goes back down to the respect. And I remember my grandmother saying to my cousin many, many years ago, she said, when you're working, pay yourself first. Even if it's only £10, pay yourself first, and then do all the other things that you need to do. Because if you don't, you will resent working. So as a
Yeah.
business owner, as business owners, how do you, it doesn't have to be the big, what did JP say? Range Rover. It can be, it's a token.
Yeah.
It's a token that you can
Yes.
do, periodically,
Yes.
because you know what would make that person happy. And sometimes it might
Yes.
just be some time to go off and, on a retreat. That's a lovely
Yeah.
gift for them to do
Yeah.
nothing, especially if somebody like JP, if he is a workaholic, to send him off to a silent retreat. There's no phone, there's no internet, there's just nature and peace. It's a great
Yeah.
gift, and I think we do have to recognise each other when we are working for the family, for the, in a family business, how are we recognising our great work?
Yes. And also recognizing ourselves, right? And again, I feel like if I don't appreciate myself and recognize um my strengths and what I've done well, I'm doing well, then even if somebody else pats me on the back, it actually doesn't really do that much, or is it very temporary, and then it just fades off and it kind of feels like it's never enough. So um it feels like it's that kind of inner work that we also have to do. And for me, it felt like the business, it definitely pushed us both, or pushed me for sure, to kind of do loads of inner work, because without it, you couldn't, we couldn't move on as fast. And yeah, you kind of get those tools which you can apply to so many different areas
Yes, I agree
of
with
your
you.
life.
That self-esteem, that self-worth that you have to know
Yeah.
about yourself is really important. And quite often, it does take some maturity to start to focus inwards. And I guess that's where the hormones come in. When you've got all of these hormones raging around your body, you can do all of these dynamic things, and you can be, quite aggressively in the market to do these things.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of the hormones, is to
Yeah.
hunt and gather and fetch and, have late nights, early
Yeah.
mornings, and to get the work done. But the beauty of maturing is that you can start to reflect and do that inner work. And that inner work brings peace and a real, I guess, resilience, really, a sense of self and an ability to speak openly and in your truth to your partner.
Yeah.
And not to just do things because someone else is saying that you need to or you have to. It's got to make sense
Yeah.
to you now.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think a lot of times we don't realize how much whatever is not, sorted within us, or we have perhaps so many unfilled holes within it, and it affects everything. And we then don't understand, and we get frustrated. Why is it going this way and that way? And but that's, again, it's not something people talk about, especially if you think about construction. You get all these guys and working hard and on tools very often, and they suddenly not going to sit down and be like, yeah, you know what, like, I feel so empty or this. And it's just so much of masculinity, masculine. How do you pronounce that word?
So masculinity.
Yeah, masculinity. That is almost like you can't be sensitive and you can't be, you know, uh, yeah, like gentle, which is so not true. It's almost like the opposite, that when you start doing it, you're I don't know, it's just something happens to, especially to men, because the women, I think, more often naturally do that. We share a lot and we talk about it a lot. And there's things that, whatever's happening in our life or within us, but men don't tend to do it. So, but yeah, it's so related.
And I think, again, you're right. It's the culture of construction is men don't cry. Men aren't sad. We'll go down the pub. We'll have a drink. Oh,
Yes.
if they see that one of their colleagues is feeling low, they'll say, let's go down the pub, stereotypically. But they're not saying, let's go down to the pub and let's talk about it. We're going down the pub to have a drink, to, drink away the sadness.
Yeah.
And it's often
to slightly forget
helpful,
about
but
it.
it is the way in which our men have been conditioned. If you are a man who's in, I don't know, say the social care system, they're more likely to talk and be in touch with their, this emotional side of them, because they know that these people around them will listen. And I do think that within the construction industry, because I know that the rates of depression are very high and suicides are very high, is that how can we change that for our men? Because our men are valuable people in our lives, and regardless of what they are going through, they need to know that we are here as managers, as project managers. If you see that someone is being a bit off or is behaving in a way that, if there's been any changes, or that someone's either had a breakup, divorce, that they're not living at home anymore, it's okay to ask the question. And even though you may not have solutions to support them, everyone needs to know that there is someone out there who they can talk to. There's going to be helplines that perhaps should be on every building site. I don't know, I've not been on a building site for many years, but there has to be things in those portaloos, with a notice on there saying, if you're feeling down, call this number, as a general thing, because one lost man in society who's lost because of depression, suicide, or loneliness is one too many. So many of us around for men to talk to. As you said, women will find a woman to talk to and she'll have time, but we have to do equal for the men, especially knowing what the rates are in construction.
Yeah. And that's kind of takes us to seeking the support, right? Which again, I feel perhaps for men is not as easy as for women, as in like the natural, and also the social kind of expectations and pressures that are applied on men versus women. But I guess also to taking a little bit step back and talking about relationships and partnership, and when or at what point would you suggest that the couple who runs a business together do go out and search for a support to, perhaps help with the business, but I believe that's really going to be connected also to their personal relationship? When and to whom to go to, how to go about it?
For many people, when it comes to their businesses, they often go to a business coach, which I think is a really good idea, especially when it comes to, the business has grown. I'm now at a point that I'm not sure where to go with this. They can do the succession planning, because they may not want to be doing this for the next 20 years. So they may want to be able to hand over their business in its entirety, but they want to have some safeguards that they don't want the business to change fundamentally. They just want somebody else to take it, to keep it moving. And so having a business coach or a business mentor, someone who has a track record of supporting businesses, is the best, I would say, in my opinion, the best people to go to. And to find that's about doing your research. Or if there is a company who you have followed, admired, observed over the years, yes, it's a bold move to make contact with the MD, But people do that all the time, to ask for an audience with, to have a conversation with this person, because we want to know, how did you do it? You know, I think about, although it's not construction, but I'm sure it's the same, but Richard Branson, when he was growing his businesses, he had probably 3 young children around his feet. He was obviously working from home. And he had to think strategically as to how is he going to be an active father as well as a businessman. He had so many businesses that failed before Virgin took off. And it was ongoing talking to other people in various industries that would have given him a helping hand. We don't do it on our own. We do rely on other people to give us a help up and to have those conversations, because successful people are always happy to share their knowledge. It's whether you then implement the knowledge that they have taken the time out to share with you.
Yeah, which is so interesting because it kind of applies to the idea of competition. And I mean, our business mentor, which we have had for many years, always said there's no such thing like competition, because you may share everything you know and show everything how you do it, but pretty much nobody actually is gonna apply to real life and actually do it. And it's so true, you know, like, so it's just searching and finding someone we can resonate maybe with, and then ask questions, and that would help with the giving solutions to business and helping with the business to grow, and kind of, I guess, putting in place who's supposed to do maybe what and how to, you know, clear a little bit, because also they have to be adjustments to the business as we grow. And I guess if there is any, you know, personal issues, you'll find maybe therapists that you can resonate. Either, do you find that typically couples are more successful going to a couple therapy or individual therapy, or maybe that varies, depends on people?
In my experience, couples have used both, because there's often things in the individual's childhood that impacts on the relationship. And so in a couples therapy session, it wouldn't be appropriate to unpick the childhood of one of the couple before we can move forward. So we need to, you know, do things in tandem, or to just say, I'm actually going to seek counselling for myself, because it's not always about the other person. So actually, you know what?
which we often forget, right?
Exactly. This is
we think, okay, she needs to change your key. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, if I just like listened up a little bit, it probably would have been so much easier. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, obviously in the UK, more and more people are accessing counselling. And it's a really healthy, it's such a healthy thing to do, where you can just talk about yourself. This isn't about ego. This is about healing.
Yes.
And, you know, being able to have that 45 minutes once a week to just offload. And the counsellor or the psychotherapist are really expert in what they do, is that they will just give you that time. They may ask some interesting questions that will make you critically think back. Because again, we reflect on our childhoods, and we, you know, sometimes we can be really angry. We can assume why things have happened. But it's only when we're sitting down with a therapist that we can start to go, well, actually, what was going on for our mothers or our fathers or our primary caregivers?
Yeah.
And we take the time to think, well, actually, this happened and that happened. So this is why, and this is why I am, because of what they were going through, which often isn't an excuse, but it's about understanding. And from the understanding, sometimes we get to a point of forgiveness, because when we have a grievance, carrying it around on our shoulders is such a heavy load. And, you know, often we, if we're going back in our childhood, we often don't get people to apologise. So we've got to forgive ourselves, and then
to be for
find
ourselves,
that path.
for sure.
Yeah.
And it's also so interesting, especially related to businesses, that many of us don't actually understand that perhaps the an ability of getting to the next stage of a business or retaining the money or, certain issues that keep repeating actually stem from our childhood, right? And it's almost impossible to get into the next stage without actually digging in and digging deep. And it's so actually, it's really related to what we're talking today about the, business and relationships and navigating so many different things. I believe, this is so important. Like what you said, it's so important to have someone to be able to talk to, especially nowadays where there is not as much stigma around having a therapist, right? Almost like it's so fashionable, which is kind of weird, but it's good. It's better than, having a taboo around having therapists. And because if we do want to grow the business, we need to understand that we need to also grow ourselves.
Absolutely.
To get to the next stage.
Absolutely. I'm currently working with a parent, and I've been working with them for probably 4 years. That's not 4 years of having weekly sessions. She will make contact with me just as a top-up. And counselling and therapy, it's a little bit like you're having a top-up of your, the resilience on picking some things that may have triggered for you. And then you have this conversation with me for an hour or so. And then it's kind of like, oh, yeah, I feel much better now. And I've got some extra tools that I can use to, continue growing the family in a really healthy way. But it's that checking in. It's like, going to the dentist every 6 months or once a year.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to do. Have a checkup with yourself, your emotional well-being. Your mental health is really important. And often the healthier our mental health is reliant on people listening to our concerns.
Yeah, that's so true. Which often, being in relationships, we don't tend to listen often to each other. We just want to be listened to, right? So there, all sorts of arguments can come up from that. But talking about, maybe people that you have been working with, can you tell us maybe like some success stories where you have had either individual that worked with their partner and run a business, or maybe a couple? How did it start, and maybe why they came to you, and how that developed, and what the results were in the end?
Okay, so I think this one is quite an interesting one. So it started off as a couple. One of them was more determined to do the work. The other person wasn't. And that caused a lot of conflict, unfortunately. And they separated. They did divorce. And whilst that sounds as if it was a negative thing, what came out of that, I guess probably 2 or 3 years later, has been a new home in a new city, a completely new life. I'd encourage this person to journal, to talk about her story. And she started writing quite prolifically. She's like really keen to write out her story. And she has been transformed. The person that she was within that marriage is a completely different person to this lone parent going alone, but really thriving. So I think the conversations that we had, the insecurities that she felt were almost like, we worked through those because actually she is a very capable and creative mother who is thriving, and her children are thriving. They've managed to work through to have like a co-parenting relationship. But I think the biggest success has got to be her as a woman, glowing and thriving, having made a very difficult decision after having, lots of really trying to work on the marriage, but it was only going one way. Only one person wanted to work at it.
I see.
As far as the couples are concerned, an ex-policeman that I worked with and his family. They, had their own business, and their three children. They had difficulty communicating. He worked long hours. The shifts weren't great.
Sure.
Mum was trying to do it all. They had a couple of dogs. It was very difficult.
Yeah.
But in having the conversation about what their needs were, what their wants were, what the vision was, what the goal was, we worked together, and, they're doing very well. And he's now retired, and they are still a successful couple with their dogs and their children and their grandchildren now. So
which actually does make me because that example kind of I remember I watched something and made me think of how often men may and in construction as well, like they work insane hours, and either the partner is in the in the business or not. She might do slightly less, especially if the kids are involved. And so they start missing each other, not having time for each other. And the man thinks, oh, I'm doing this everything for my family, but then not understanding that actually that's not necessarily what the family needs, and what maybe the wife or another partner wants. And again, it's just going back to very beginning what you said is the communication part. Because we may be just working, one person might be working insanely and actually hated and, just hate everything, but just works for the family. And it actually turns out you never needed to do it. So it just destroys us rather than build us. So again, it's just finding it's the communication and having the same vision.
Yeah. Communication, the vision, the respectful communication, the reviewing what's going on, the time together, away from the business, having a code. We're not talking business. We're not talking children. We're just going to enjoy each other's company. Even if we're enjoying each other's company in silence, having a massage, or having a couples massage where we're just together, it's very restoring.
In our own presence.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is the network, the security network, your circle of support or your network circle, because if it's just you and the children, where is the other help? Where is the support? Mm-hmm. Who do you trust? How do you build that so that your children know that there are these people that they can equally trust and go to if they don't want to go to mum and dad? Because that's really important.
Yes.
What we want to be all things to our children, is that fair on them for them to only rely on us?
Yeah.
And if we want to keep them all to ourselves, what does that say about us? Is that something that is back from our childhood that's impacting us, how we're protecting our children? And in protecting our children, are we disadvantaging them?
Yeah. Very interesting point. Definitely something I'll be thinking about and quizzing myself about. But I wanted to actually, talking now about kids as well, I wanted to ask your opinion or experience around having children not involved, but being around the business. And what I mean by that is, so for instance, now I'm not involved in the business. JP runs the business, and he runs from home, wherever the home is, wherever we move. And when possible, and if our little one wants to, we're both very happy to be in the same space where JP may be having conversation with his business partner and going through, some details. And we kind of feel that it's in a way good, and I don't know if important, but it's like quite good for him to be around it and hear and see what now daddy is doing and why. And it's kind of, for us, it's like the vision that we all have. How do you see this? Do you feel like kids kind of mingling and being in between and seeing what's happening, kind of almost becoming part of it? It's a good and beneficial for the kid and the family? Or would you say just separate it completely, and it's better to, this is just business, and then we having a family time.
I think both work really well. I think it is important for children to know how mum and dad are earning their money, what they're doing. They need to understand the work ethic, which is really important, especially when you're self-employed. Our children need to see that this is hard work, but also it's about the boundaries. So if, for example, as you said, JP's on the phone, he's having a business call. Is your son old enough, mature enough to respect daddy's time on the phone? Because it means that daddy is in work mode, so he can't actually be in daddy mode and, play with the train set, for example. He has to be able to focus. So at that point, it's about how do we remove little one from the business conversation so that he doesn't feel as if daddy is ignoring him because he's unworthy. So we have to manage that, I think. There has to be some kind of level of boundary. But I do think it's important for children to know what the jobs are that their parents are doing, understanding economics, understanding the value of things, understanding that by mummy doing this or daddy doing that, it means that we can go off and do, have a lovely holiday, for example. So that's really important. And it's about our children having the sense of responsibility for themselves. As a 3-year-old, his responsibility is tidying away his toys. This is his room. He can do those things, and we have to equip him with because that's a little job. It starts from once they can make this mess, they can put it away. It starts from then, so that he has a sense of purpose, that we can say, thank you for tidying up. Thank you for tidying your room. Thank you for putting your bricks back into the box. That impacts on the family. We appreciate you. Because when he goes out into the world of work, or if he takes on the family business, we want him to know that we appreciate his efforts. In the same way, they should all be saying thank you to you for cooking a lovely meal. Because even if
thank you, Daddy, for doing the magic upstairs. Right? This is a very good point, because everything contributes to us as a unit.
Absolutely. We're a team. I think for me, it's like this teamwork. That we all contribute. And that's a great thing when we can all pull together. How amazing is that?
Yes, yeah. And I think that's what it also dissolves, all this kind of idea of chores and something what we hate doing is something what we all doing to make our own space better and nicer, where we all love to be together and spending time together. And it's kind of like the modeling part. And just going back into our little one being around, especially JP when he can, it's so interesting to see him where he asks JP for a little keyboard and pen, and he just does, and glasses, and he does his stuff, and I may sit next to him and just draw something. And it's and also I feel he learns that it doesn't have to be something hard, which we all kind of often have that need of praising ourselves only when we do hard work. But you don't have to. The life can be beautiful without all of this hardship. Obviously there are things hard, but just it can be nice, and we can do all this magic for, because we like it.
Absolutely. I think the other thing is that when our children are around us, when we're having these, higher brow conversations, business conversations, it really helps with his language development and the words that he will be using. He'll be using these words, maybe construction-related terms, and he'll be using them in an appropriate way because he understands the context. If all you hear is clap, sat, mat, then those are the only words that he will use. So being around, JP, when he is having some conversations appropriately, when, if he's talking to you, for example, is really healthy. Language development. We've realised that the children who have been born since 2020, that their language development has been impacted because they haven't been off at the children's centres or in preschools or nurseries, etc. And that sometimes parents have not been around extended family. And so sometimes if they're not confident, they have limited conversations. Not every parent takes their children to the library. Not every parent is reading to their children. And even the baby in the womb can be read a story to, because they start to respond. And it is a beautiful thing when you start to see your little child have a love and appreciation for learning, for reading, for having the patience to hear, a story, to see it through to the end, and then to ask really inquisitive questions when they're turning over the pages. And that's what parents can put into their children before they go into any of these, these institutions, potentially.
Yeah. All right. It's been a lot, and it's been thank you so much, because there's been so many points that I may have already known, but definitely for me to think about again and reconsider and apply, actually, and definitely few new things which I may have never thought about. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for your time. I am sure that there will be someone who will absolutely be in love with all the information that you have shared with us.
Excellent.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely. I love talking to you. And I just hope that, as you said, that any of the listeners will be inspired and encouraged by some of those tips. And they can always reach out and have another conversation.
Definitely. At least just one person, and it's been worth it. Right?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much.
Good
Thank
seeing
you.
Lovely talking to you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.